Okay. Well, yesterday I mentioned to you that I grew up in Los Angeles in the suburb. Boring suburb. I don't know if you've ever been to Los Angeles in the valley, in the suburbs there. And just as far as I could see, I'd walk out in my neighborhood, and anywhere I went, all the houses looked the same. They might have been painted different colors, but it didn't matter. They were all the same. They had the same front yard, the same tree sticking in the middle of the lawn. And being a normal kid, I wanted to get the hell out of there. And so during the summer, my friend and I would get on our two little feet, and we'd just start walking and see if we could get out of that neighborhood. And we just would walk. We'd walk sidewalks and walk as far as we dared. And as far as we went, everything looked the same. It was all the same. And this was very disheartening to us. But we kept trying to get out of there. Well, one day, my parents did a wonderful thing. They liberated me. They freed me. They gave me a bicycle. Suddenly, in the same amount of time, I could go a lot further. And my friend got a bicycle as well. And so we hopped on our bikes, and we rode with one object in mind, which was getting beyond that boring neighborhood. And so we kept riding, and suddenly we did. Suddenly we came to the end of a street, and this street dead-ended. And at the end of the street, there was a ravine. There were bushes and trees growing along the edge of this ravine. We got off our bikes because we'd seen nothing like this before. We got to the edge of the ravine, and we looked down, and running down through the middle of this ravine was a stream in the middle of Los Angeles. We were absolutely thrilled. Suddenly, we had another world available to us, and we dumped our bikes there, and we skittered down the bank down to the stream. And as soon as we got below the level of the bank, Los Angeles disappeared, and we were in another world. It was absolutely fantastic. We took off our shoes and socks, and we stuck our feet in the stream and played around in the mud, and we sat on the little bit of sand by the side of the stream, and we sat there in the sand and soaked up the summer sun. It was wonderful. And so every day after that, we would get on our bikes and ride straight to that ravine, dump them, slide down the bank, and go splash around the water, sit by the bank and make plans for our futures, figure out how we were going to kill the bullies in school, things like that. It was fantastic. One day, we were sitting there with our feet in the stream, and we thought, well, we should explore this stream. Maybe we can find out where it comes from. So we picked up our shoes, and we started walking right up through the middle of the stream, in the mud. And we started walking up through the middle of the stream, and we're walking and walking, going around one turn and another turn and another turn. And at last, finally, we came around a final turn, and we stood there at the source of the stream. We had discovered the source of the stream. We were standing there staring up at a great big concrete wall with a big sewer pipe sticking out of it. And there was this sewer water flowing out, and it smelled pretty bad too. And suddenly that wonderful mud we'd been playing in for a couple of weeks didn't seem so wonderful anymore. And so we got out of the stream, and we stood on the sand, and I'm wiping off my feet on the sand like that, trying to clean them off. And just as I'm wiping off my feet in the sand, suddenly my foot hit something down in the sand. I looked down, and there was something brown and hard sticking up out of the sand. Now I was going to be very careful. I got down and looked at it very closely to see what this brown hard thing was. And I realized that it was the end of a bone sticking up out of the sand. So I started digging very carefully around it, and pretty soon I pulled out of the sand this bone that was about that long. Had knobs on one end, and it came down, kind of flattened down, and it was broken off here. And I'm sitting there looking at this bone going, wow, it's really brown, dark brown, old. I'm sure it's really old. I wonder what animal it came from. Well, we climbed out of the bank, and I took my bone with me. We made our way back to the bikes. And by the time we got to our bikes, I was thinking, you know what? I'll bet this bone belongs to a dinosaur. And by the time I got home with my bone, I was sure it belonged to a dinosaur. I came into the house and I showed my parents my bone. I said, look what I found. I found a bone. I'm sure it's the bone of a dinosaur. They said, well, where'd you get it? So I lied. And I said, naturally. I dug it up in my friend's backyard. And I asked if they would take me to the museum to meet with a paleontologist so that we could identify what dinosaur this bone belonged to. And they said, sure. So I called up and I said, I need to talk to a paleontologist. And I did. I made an appointment for the next morning to meet with a paleontologist. Well, I was very excited when I went to bed that night. And by the time I woke up the next morning, I was sure it was not only the bone of a dinosaur, but the bone of a rare dinosaur. Got in the car with my parents, and we started driving to the museum. And on the way to the museum, I started seeing everything very clearly. I saw in the local newspaper, this article in the newspaper, just a small article, says, local boy finds rare dinosaur bone in sewer outfall. I was very proud of that. And as we drove along, that little article became a big article on the front page of the local newspaper. And then, very quickly, it became an article on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. And there was a big article in the newspaper saying, okay, local boy finds rare dinosaur bone in sewer outfall. Dinosaur species never before known. I was very excited because also there was a photograph of me standing there holding my bone. Well, by the time we arrived at the museum, the headline read, local boy finds new species of dinosaur in sewer outfall, has been given a full scholarship to the college of his choice. So I was sure, I'm on my way. I'm going to be a world-famous paleontologist now. College is taken care of. Everything is going to be fine, taken care of. Well, I got into the museum, and I asked to find out where I should go to see the paleontologist, and they said, well, you're early. You'll have to wait a little while. I said, that's okay, because after all, I was going to be a paleontologist. I could probably figure out what bone this was myself. So I started wandering around in the museum with my bone, trying to find out, just what bone is it actually. And while I was, looking at all the skeletons, I found a perfect place, place against the wall to put this big glass case. And I could see this glass case there with my bone in it. And on the front of it was a bronze plaque. It said, on loan from the private collection of the world-famous paleontologist David Gordon. That's good. That's good. Well, finally it was time for me to meet the paleontologist, and I asked for directions, and she said, well, you just go straight down that hall all the way to the end. When you get to the end, you'll see there's a door there. Knock on that door. So I very proudly walked down that hallway, and I got to the end, and I turned, and there was this door. I looked up on the door, and it said on the door, no admittance. Paleontologists only. I thought, well, that's me. That's going to be me. I have every right to be knocking on this door. And so, without any hesitation, I knocked on the door. And a moment later, the door opened up, and there standing over me was this guy in a big white, lab coat, this big tall guy in a lab coat. He really was a paleontologist. And I looked up at him, and he looked down at me and said, are you the boy with the bone? said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "Well, come on in." So I came in, and he said, "Close the door," and I closed the door behind me. And he said, "Well, let me see it." He held out his hand, and I handed him my bone, and he took it like this, and he turned it over and over like that. He said, "It's the rib of a cow." And he handed it back to me. And I stood there holding the rib of a cow that I got from a sewer outfall. And all of a sudden that glass case crumbled into a million little pieces, and the universities took back all their scholarships, and the newspapers went up in flames, you know. And I was standing there, absolutely embarrassed, had lost everything, standing there holding the rib of a cow, staring down at the floor, wondering how am I going to get out of here with some little bit of dignity. And then the paleontologist said to me, "Well, since you're here, would you like to look around?" And for the first time, I looked up to see where I actually was. I looked around, and I was in this huge laboratory filled with real paleontologists, all wandering around, building skeletons of dinosaurs and putting things in plaster and cutting bones in sections, looking at things under microscopes. They were all doing real paleontological work. I suddenly realized I was on the other side of the door that said no admittance. I was on the other side of that door. I was on the inside. And I said yes. And I spent the next hour wandering around the laboratory, and they showed me what it really means to be a paleontologist in there. Now, yesterday, we began this journey, this exploration that we're involved in these 3 days, we're calling modeling. So I just want to recap a few things, just to kind of bring us all back into the room here. And that is that what we're doing, the enterprise we're engaged in as modelers, it's a process of creating useful maps of human abilities. And I think some of the important things to just hold on to about this as a definition is that, first of all, this word process. I mean, when as I think you are getting a sense of from yesterday's work and experience, is that modeling is not something you do to somebody. It's not a technique. It's a way of interacting with somebody in order to, with that person, with your exemplar, to create some kind of map, that is some kind of description of what it is that they do, what it is that they're able to do. And that the kind of the qualifier on that map, we don't want just any kind of map. We don't want just any kind of description. We want a useful one. And by useful, we mean one that allows us to reproduce what this person does, allows us to do what our exemplar does. Now, how do we create a useful description? How do we make sure that we have a useful map, one that provides us the information we need to do what we want to do, or do what they do? Well, I think there's kind of two general things that we need. One thing we need is a set of distinctions. That is, we need to know what we're paying attention to, what we're going to, as we gather information, as we interact with this person, what do we pay attention to? What do we want to find out about their experience? What do we want to pull from or recognize in their experience that makes it possible for us to get some access to what they do? So we need a set of distinctions. And then we started we started exploring some of those distinctions that I think are relevant. How your exemplar dresses is generally not going to be, I think, a distinction we need to care about. The kinds of things that I do think are relevant and can be significant are what is this person's external behavior? What do they do with their bodies and their facial expressions? We'll go through all these in detail today. What kinds of emotional states are they in? what are their strategies? That is, what are they doing on the inside and the outside to affect the world, to make things happen? And what are the beliefs that they're operating out of? What are the cause effects and the equivalences that they bring to this particular context in which they are affected? And also, as we talked about yesterday, we can list all that information. I'm suggesting that we use this format as a way of capturing it, because, as you know, when you work with people and you start asking them questions, so tell me about yourself, give me information about you, they do. And it doesn't come out in a necessarily already set out in the distinctions that you want and with clarity and so on. That human experience is got all kinds of multiple layers that are operating simultaneously. How do we, keep track of all that information? Well, I'm suggesting to us all that one way to keep track of it is by using this format. All we've done here is we've created what are artificial boxes in which to put certain kinds of experiences that human beings have. Their behaviors, how they're feeling, how they're thinking, and how they're believing. And I think that this is useful, at least in the learning stages, because it allows us to be keep track of what we know and what we still haven't found out about. This helps us know, okay, I do need to find out about what this person's strategies are, so I can listen for that. When I find something that has to do with their strategies, I can stick it, I know where to put it, and I can recognize that I have found out what their strategies are, but I still have not found out, for instance, perhaps what their beliefs are. So, want to use this format. We're going to use this format. We want to use other distinctions about beliefs are what we spent most of the rest of yesterday on, and we will continue to do some more with today. And that has to do with, that we've captured in something we call a belief template. All right, the belief template. So, as we talked about yesterday, people have got millions and millions of beliefs that they're always operating out of. And a lot of the things that come out as beliefs are actually redundant in the sense that they're saying different things, but they're all being generated by the same structures. The same certain small set of structures are generating an infinite number of ways of expressing that structure. So, how do we kind of pull out of all that stuff? How do we focus on what are the essential structures that are operating in this person's beliefs? So, before I recap that, any questions about any of the things that I've been talking about so far? Mm-hmm. Diane.
As I was
Diane. Oh, Mike. Oops. We're out.
under the chair.
Yeah. Yeah, this is real life here, folks. This is the way it really is. It doesn't come in lines and boxes. Okay. So Diane.
Thank you. As I was going over my notes and what we did yesterday, I'm not clear yet about the criterion and the motivation because I get them mixed up.
Well, I'm about to talk about them now.
Oh,
so
okay. Then I'll.
Okay, so let's see. Let's find out if my recapping of that helps. Okay. So here we got somebody who's good at doing something. They've got some abilities. So Shireen is helping us here by being our exemplar. She has the ability to help children who are coming from a different culture to adapt to the new culture that they're coming into. Now, we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to do that. One of the things that makes her an exemplar of this, one of the things that makes anybody an exemplar of something, that is, they're good at it, is that they know what to put their attention on and what's irrelevant, what not to put their attention on. That is, they put their attention on those things that bring into their experience what they need to operate effectively in that situation. That's what makes that's one of the things, one of the essential things that makes somebody an exemplar. They know what to put their attention on that works. That works. So, one of the questions we'll want to answer for ourselves is, when we're working with an exemplar, is what does this person put his or her attention on? They don't attend to everything. They don't respond to everything. They don't care about everything. That's the people who care about everything and try and respond to everything. That's the rest of us who aren't good at it, whatever it is, who don't know what to attend to, and so we tend either to things that are inappropriate, or we try to tend to too much or everything, and that's one of the things that makes it possible for us to not be exemplars of a particular ability. Okay, I think one of the things you'll find as you do more and more modeling is just what I'm describing. Is one of the things that makes somebody good at something is they really know what's important in that particular context. It's not that they're not aware of these other things and so on, but they know what really matters, and that's where they put their attention. So we want to know where they have their attention. Now, what we're calling, that focus of attention is the criterion. Criterion is what you want to have, what is most important to you to have satisfied or fulfilled in a particular context or situation. So, for example, with Shireen, when she has a child come into her class that's from a different culture, where does she put her attention? She doesn't put her attention on controlling the child. She doesn't put her attention on making them happy. She doesn't put her attention on looking professional. She doesn't put her attention on pleasing parents. There's all these things that she could have her attention on. She might think about them, but that's not where the focus is. What she wants to satisfy or fulfill, so where she puts her attention, is on that this child, she or he, feels comfortable. That's what she's orienting her experience towards fulfilling or satisfying. So what happens then is that the strategies, the thinking that she does, and the behavior she engages in is all organized towards somehow satisfying or fulfilling that criterion that is bringing about, with this child, a feeling of comfort. You guys follow me on that? Make sense? Okay. So, and as we experimented yesterday, if you try stepping into that same situation and imagine using a different focus of attention, a different criterion such as power or being in control or something like that, it'll generate completely different responses in you and different behaviors and so on. And you certainly would not be Shireen in that situation. So the criterion is a label for a particular kind of experience that Shireen wants to satisfy or have fulfilled in that context. So we made the point that the criterion is this essential, focus of attention in that context. But criteria generally are just that. They're labels for an experience. And when somebody uses a label, we can't necessarily know what that means in terms of experience for the exemplar. Remember, the whole point of modeling is we want to find out what the exemplar's experience is and take it on ourselves. We don't want to put our experience on the exemplar. So that's why in modeling it becomes important to not just stop at the label, but go deeper and find out, well, what does she mean by that? Because we all might have different ideas about what comfortable is. Then we want to go after what's called the definition by asking, well, what do you mean by feeling comfortable? Or what is feeling comfortable? Different ways to ask the question. And she then explained to us what kind of experience she has coded as feeling comfortable. And that is for her that this child is feeling safe in her presence and in the presence of other children. Okay? It could be many other different, it could be infinite other definitions, and you would have a different experience, a different person. Suppose instead feeling comfortable was the child had no worries. Would that be a different experience? The child has no worries. Yeah. How about if instead comfortable means the child is comfortable means getting whatever you want. That would be really different. You would interact with the child very differently, wouldn't you, if that was what comfortable meant? Okay. I think you get the point that if you're going to take on your exemplar's ability, that means taking on the focus of their attention, and you want to know not just what the label is, but you want to know what the experience is. That is, you want to know what the definition of the criterion is. Now, going a little bit deeper then into it, is since this is the experience that she wants to make sure happens or occurs, the next thing that we will want to know is, how does she know when it's occurring? That is, what does she pay attention to? What does she listen to or look at or see or feel that lets her know that this child is feeling safe in her presence and in the presence of other children? This tells us kind of what the sensory goals are. What do I have to see, hear, and feel to know that my criterion is satisfied? How do I know when I can stop? Because what she is going to do is what we all do in relation to our criteria is we're going to keep acting. We're going to keep engaging our strategies, engaging our behavior until we satisfy our criterion. Right? Once it's satisfied, we can stop engaging. We can stop doing whatever it is. If you keep doing what you've been doing and your criterion's always satisfied, that's a problem. Or is already satisfied, that's a problem. So you need to have evidence, a way to know when this criterion is satisfied and when it's not. So we found out from Shireen that how she knows the child feels safe in her presence and in the presence of other children is that the initial behavior changes. So there's a shift in the initial behavior, it changes in some way. The child is now becoming aware of other children and of Shireen and the activities that are going on around them. And the child is taking action to interact with other children and with the environment. And that there are also changes in the facial expression and breathing of the child. So those are the things that she's paying attention to know whether or not what she's doing is working. Is what I'm doing working? That is taking me towards satisfying my criterion, or is it not? And these are the indicators that let her know, yes, I'm moving towards that, or I've arrived, or no, I'm not. So you guys with me on this so far? Yeah? Yes? Yeah, Jim.
I think one of the things that's
This is one of the things I'm struggling with.
and part of the confusion for me in doing the exercise was this whole quadrant is labeled belief.
Mm-hmm.
And belief for me is pretty abstract. But as we're doing this, we're also getting pretty specific and pretty concrete. And that's where I'm having, I guess in my own head, I'm having trouble keeping that big frame and getting this concrete and then going back to being more abstract. And it's sort of like I'm sort of going around in circles in my own head, I think, around that.
Okay. First of all, these are abstractions. They're well, these are inherently, necessarily abstractions. These are not direct. None of this is direct. There's no direct experience up here. There's description of experience. So this is all abstractions. Secondly, let's see. How can I give this to you in a way that might be useful to you? Let's try this, Jim. Beliefs are abstractions, absolutely. They certainly are abstractions. But what is a belief? It is an abstraction that somehow captures or describes experience. I mean, that's where all our beliefs come from, and we'll talk some about this tomorrow when we talk about acquisition, that beliefs come from, are based on our descriptions of our experiences. That is that, so for instance, I get a, oh, well, so I know this person in France who said, she she smacked her hand in a door, right? And then she right away, she knew it was gonna hurt, swell up, and so on, and she got so concerned, she was so rattled by it, she hit the door again and smacked her hand again in the same place. All right. Now, what happened was, afterwards, she was expecting to, have a finger that big. It never hurt after that. It was not. It didn't swell up. Didn't get black and blue. It was fine. This is all direct experience. There's nothing abstract about any of that. However, she did abstract from that. That is, she did create a belief from that, which was that if you injure yourself, if you then repeat the injury right away in the same way, it'll heal right away. Yes. So now we mustn't titter about this because we all do this. We all do this. Well, I'll give you my own example. Years ago, I went to the bathroom. So I was taking a leak. And, I'm taking a leak, and there's this very strange smell from my urine. And I'm going, what is that? It was a familiar smell. I knew it. I knew this smell. And I realized, it was the smell of the rat cages in the laboratory in high school. Well, that was odd. A few weeks later, I'm going to the bathroom again, and there's the smell again. And what's this about? What's going on here? And I remembered those rat cages, and I was remembering that I used to go into those cages, the area where we had the cages, and I used to torment a lot of the rats there. I'd poke them and play with them. Well, I called it play, but it wasn't really play. I was tormenting them. And it occurred to me, well, maybe I was stressing them out. And the smell of their urine was indicative of the stress that they were under. Okay? And then I started thinking, well, have I been under stress lately? And I thought, well, yeah, I have been under stress, but now it's going away. Maybe this smell is my body, detoxifying itself. I've been through a period of stress, and it's detoxifying itself, and it's an indication that I'm coming out on the other side of this stressful period. I felt great. And for 2 years after that, I looked forward to that smell. Anytime I would get that smell, I go, wow, I'm coming out on the other side of this stressful period, that's good. I started to feel really good, I'm hopeful. Things are getting better because I'm making that terrible smell. All right? So this went on for about 2 years. One day we were having dinner we had folks over for dinner. And I went to the bathroom. There was a smell again. I was feeling pretty good, Oh, great, I'm progressing again. Came back to the table. A little while later, somebody else went to the bathroom and came back and said something about, boy, I just can't stand the way that asparagus makes your urine stink. I said, what? What are you talking about? And that's when I got the real explanation. It's asparagus. You eat asparagus, within a half an hour or less, your urine gets this particular smell. It smells just like the rat smell in the cages, So that's a long story to make a point, but it's an important point, particularly for all of us who are involved in working with people and are concerned about change. And we'll be talking more about this tomorrow. That is, how do beliefs come into existence? Where do they come from? Well, they are based on experience. They are ways of a belief is our description of how things affect each other in the world, in our experience. So, yes, of course, there's going to be both. And what we're trying to do through the belief template is get enough description of experience that we can get a sense for ourselves of what's going on in somebody else's world.
Let me just go back for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just creating my own language to help me get a frame around this.
Mm-hmm.
When I say to myself, so in that situation for Shireen, her belief is that it's foundational for children to feel comfortable. That's the most important thing to pay attention. I believe the most important thing to pay attention to with these children is they need to feel comfortable.
Okay. Now, I've got to adjust what you said.
Okay.
And that is, I believe, yes, that's true, as long as you don't suggest by what you're saying that she knew that. In other words, that she had as an explicit conscious belief that she didn't necessarily have that at all.
No.
Okay, good. Then we're fine. Then I'm with you, Jim.
Okay, so that's sort of the beginning point in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then she also believes prior, and this is unconscious too, that in order for kids to feel comfortable, it's important to show interest in them. That's the enabling thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she also believes if you show interest and they feel comfortable, then they will be happy.
Uh-huh. And that will...
And that will make them ready to learn or communicate.
Exactly.
Then the rest of this stuff, beneath those related beliefs,
Here?
is making it a little more explicit. How that actually, what's the specific content of those beliefs?
No, just of what
that
comfortable
belief.
is.
Yeah, that belief.
This, we could do the same thing here. If we're talking about a real human being, which remembers this.
Right.
This is more like what is really going on in folks.
Yeah.
Right? And what we're doing with the belief template is we're saying, okay, this right here is where the focus of attention is. This is what really counts, what really matters. Can we find out what the enabling cause effect for this is? Yeah. Is there something after this? Perhaps, yes. Can we also find out, be explicit about what all of these things mean? Yes. And get the evidence for them? Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we talked about before, then you could go inside of any one of these and go deeper. You know, because you could, so here he goes, yeah, and I want them to be safe, right? Okay, well, let's pull that out. What do you mean by safe? What do you mean by safe? How do you know when people are safe? And that'll create more experience. So what you're doing then is you're moving constantly through this endless spaghetti of experience, and which we can't do and don't want to do. So what we really want, what this model is intended to do, is to help us identify what's the difference that makes the difference in all of that. Where does she put her attention that makes the biggest difference in terms of her being able to manifest this ability? Because whatever that is, that's where we want to put our attention. Okay? All right? And when we get to the strategy part, we're not going to find out everything she does. We're going to try and find out what are those things she does that make the biggest difference in achieving the goal or manifesting this ability. We're not going to do everything. Okay? All right. So, Mike.
In your summary, I kept hearing you use words like towards fulfilling a criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to ask, is that towards in the sense of the motivation meta program? In other words, are they moving towards fulfilling a criteria? And if so, can you move away from fulfilling other criteria in this model?
No. People don't move away from filling criteria. But what they can do is they can move towards fulfilling away from criteria. Okay, you get that? So in other words, you generally will not find that in modeling abilities. If you start modeling problems or difficulties, you will find that, where somebody has they can have, what's important to me is to not be uncomfortable. So they are going to move towards trying to fulfill that, towards not being uncomfortable. Okay, but just by it doesn't. The way we're set up is that our behavior, our internal and external behavior, strategies and external behavior, are always operating to fulfill or satisfy some criterion. Now, that criterion might be formed set in the form of away from. There's something I want to move away from, and so I do things to fulfill that criterion of moving away from that. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Thanks for raising that, because I found when I was modeling, done a little bit of modeling in the past, I found with one exemplar, actually more than one, that they had a very strong towards set of meta programs and away from.
Mm-hmm.
Both were operating
Mm-hmm.
equally strongly, so
Mhm.
that they had criteria that were probably, they seemed to be on par. There was such a strong away from as well as towards.
Away from is a great thing. It's, as we'll talk about
And it
at the end of today or tomorrow, moving away from things is more compelling for human beings than moving towards things in general. So
I just wanted to add that.
yeah, and it's a good point. When you're modeling, actually, it's a very good point, particularly for us neurolinguistic programmers who've had it drilled into us. Put it in the positive. Put it in the positive. That's for therapy. That is not for modeling. For modeling, you're after what is, not what's a good idea or what ought to be there, or what will work better. You're after what is. And if what makes it possible for this exemplar to manifest a particular ability is that they're holding, negative images or moving away from images, then that's what works. You're only interested in what works, not what is ideal or would be a good idea. If they're good at it, then whatever they do works. Okay? Yeah. Good. Okay. So a couple more, recap these last two pieces, and then we'll take a break. So this is, as I said, is the beating heart, I think, of practically of any ability. That is identifying what is it you're trying to satisfy or fulfill. What's the focus of your attention? Because once you have that, as we've been talking about this morning, really everything that is done, both on the inside and the outside, is in relation to satisfying or fulfilling that. In a very real sense, everything flows from the criterion. Everything is based on the criterion. If you try and pull an ability from somebody and with just their behavior, but you don't have the underlying beliefs that support that are congruent with that and make it congruent, then it'll be very, generally it's going to be difficult to manifest that behavior. It'll be difficult to hold on to it through time, and it'll probably be incongruent. All right? But if you have this fundamental belief structure, as soon as you start engaging in it, as we experimented with yesterday, as soon as you step into that classroom, a child is brought in, and you just hold as what's important, the focus of your attention is that this child feels comfortable, which means feeling safe in my presence and in the presence of other children, and that means showing interest in them. Right away, your way of thinking and your behavior immediately gets engaged in ways that I think you'll find are going to be very similar to what Shireen probably already does. In fact, we heard some of the things she does, and I think you find it starts generating that. So that's why, while I know lots of times folks approach modeling by going simply after behavior, I think that's a mistake. I think that's just a mistake. You can get lucky wherein you get the behavior and you engage in it enough that over time you learn through doing it these criteria and cause effects and so on. That's great. I'm all for that. However, what I find is very often that is not what happens. People try and make the behavior happen, but there's, in a sense, nothing on the inside that's holding it, that forms the foundation for it. And so after a while, it doesn't work. They get frustrated with it. They give up with it. It goes away, This, to me, is where the real deal is. You got it. That's necessary. It's all important. This, to me, is essential. So, last two pieces. So this is what is what she wants to have satisfied or fulfilled. Now, one thing that we might also wonder about is what makes that possible. She probably has ideas, that is, beliefs, experiences that now become beliefs about what makes it possible for children to feel comfortable, feel safe in her presence. And so we can ask about that. Those we call the enabling cause effects. What leads to or makes it possible for this to happen? In her case, it's if you show interest in them. And so this tells us, the enabling cause effect tells us a lot about what's probably going to be happening in the person's behavior and in their strategy. I want them to feel comfortable, and in order for them to feel comfortable, I need to show interest in them. So right away that starts suggesting to you behavior, doesn't it? Things to do. Their behavior will flow from that. Now why is it, the other side of this is that, as I said, often the things that we do generally take work. They take effort. You got to do at it. You got to keep at it. Here she's it's not the case that a child comes in from another culture who's all upset and scared and so on, and she just does her I'm interested in you dance, and boom, they're fine. 10 seconds. Why did it take so long? No, this is is an example of something that's going to take a time. It may take days, it may take weeks, it may take months. It's going to require her to attend to, interact, work with this child and herself through time. Well, what's going to keep her doing that? Well, generally what keeps us operating in a particular context is that whatever we're doing in that particular context is actually in service of fulfilling something that's much bigger, or if you'd rather think about it, much deeper. Which much closer to what's important to you as a human being, what's essential to you as a human being, and that we call a motivating cause effect. That is, by satisfying this criteria, what does that lead to or make possible that is essential to you? That's generally connected with your identity or your ideas about what life is about and so on. And for her, it goes to being happy and being ready to communicate. All right? And probably we would find with Shireen that being happy and communicating are things that are important to her, not just in working with children, but in lots of contexts and maybe all contexts. These are things that are probably just inherently important to her in life. And in fact, as you can experiment with this in your groups, and we may get to this, it's very possible if we start talking with her about how she goes about making dinner and what's important to her when making dinner for people, and then start finding out, start taking that through the chain. Well, why is that important? Why is that important? You probably find out that leads to people being happy and communicating as well. This is typically what you will find. But regardless of that, the point is that one of the things that you can find out from somebody is what is kind of the larger picture, if you will, or the deeper significance of satisfying this criterion. And why that's important is that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you operating, behaving, working to satisfy this criterion. Because it's not, just because you have the ability doesn't mean it's easy. It can take work, you run into difficulties and so on. What's going to keep you going even though things are difficult? Even though it's not working, even though it's taking a lot of time? Well, what keeps you going is not what's happening necessarily right now, but the larger significance that's drawing you on. Does that make sense? So that's why this is worth finding out. So that's it. That's where we're at. Yes, Anwar?
So a little bit about the enabling cause effect,
Mm-hmm.
how to fix that.
Okay, can you hold that 1 second? I just want to make one more point. Just hold your mic. And because the mic reminded me of Mike from yesterday. In the work that he was doing, the criterion for his ability was proficiency was proficiency, and proficiency meant what was it? Right there. Proficiency meant being able to practically apply things, being able to practically apply things that you learn. That's what proficiency is, being able to practically apply things. What we found out with him, when you ask, well, why is that important? What does that lead to or make possible? Why is that important? It didn't go any further for him. That is that he would just say, his answer would be, well, then you can do things that are practical, and and you can apply things. Well, why is that important? Well, it just is. And that's something I want you to be aware of, is that the other answer that he gave was, well, then I feel fulfilled. Then I feel fulfilled, which is an indicator that when I said that what you're after is fulfilling your criteria, and he says, well, when that criterion is fulfilled, I feel fulfilled. So all of those things indicate that there isn't a motivating cause effect, that this, what he has as his criterion in that context, is inherently motivating for him. It's already at the core of who he is. And that's something you will find at times, that the criterion that somebody is holding in a particular context is already, it's as deep as it goes for that person. It doesn't go any deeper. Do you guys follow me on that? And the way you can tell is when you ask, well, why is that important? Or what does that lead to? They either respond by saying, well, it's just completely satisfying, or it's I feel fulfilled. Or they say things like, well, that's what life's about. That's what life's about. Another thing will happen is they'll just say the same thing again and again, which is something that he was doing, maybe with different words. But every time you ask, they'll try and help you out by coming up with a different answer, but they're actually saying the same thing with just different words. All right? And then the fourth one, my favorite, is when you ask them that, and they look at you like you're an idiot for asking. Well, why is that important? And they go, oh, what do you mean, why is that important? Then you know you've got the end. Okay? Because for them, as is for all of us, anything that is, at the core of who we are, the essential, we tend to operate or assume that is what life's about. And of course, everybody has the same idea about those things, Okay, so I wanted to get that point. So Anwar, you had a question about
Yes,
the enabling cause effect.
Enabling cause effect.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is, it's not bigger than the criteria, but it is the cause of the criteria, or what makes the criteria to happen.
This person believes that this is a prerequisite
Uh-huh.
or a prerequisite to the criterion being satisfied or fulfilled. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Don't talk about it's bigger than, or, that you'll get into big trouble that way. Size of criteria. Okay. Let's take a break.